David and I first met, my memory is that he was an assistant solicitor at the time. 6 months after that, something like that, David left the solicitor's office. So I approached him. I said, would you like to come and work with me? He immediately said yes.
We connected perfectly, both personally and professionally. I mean, I
somehow sort of taught him how to practice law. And I always say he got me out of my bad habits.
David was an aggressive lawyer. He sort of attacked the case.
And he liked the profession of law. And I think that's what made him a good lawyer, is he liked what he was doing. He connected with people, he connected with his clients, he connected with police officers, with solicitors. So that's what made him successful.
When David first came into this office,
he was connected then with children's groups. I noticed him doing that. And then he just expanded his community work from there. He actively did that. He didn't sit on any boards or any of that stuff. He got out there and did the work with the needy in the community. David's family, you know, his mother and father from Spartanburg, they live here now. They're wonderful people. He has 2 brothers, both of them lawyers. David has a son, Fletcher, and David did everything with him. I think what I'll mostly remember about him is just his dynamic energy. He was as good a friend as I've ever had.
I first met Bill when I joined the law firm in around 1985. Some lawyers are great trial lawyers. He was a great real estate lawyer. Bill was the go-to guy for a lot of larger corporate clients and a lot of individual clients. For example, Max Hill. There were certain people that would go to no one except Bill Bates because they knew that Bill was going to get it and he was going to get it done right. He did a lot of his work in his office or in a room that we had set aside for him. We call it the Bill Bates War Room, where he would literally go in there and attack a survey, a massive document, loan agreements, you name it. It was what Bill was known for doing. And I can't think of any other lawyer I've ever worked with who was as focused as he was on a project from start to finish. He liked to tackle things that were complex and big. He was the absolute epitome of perfection when it came to his work product. Bill and Cheryl were a wonderful couple. They have great children, 3 great children. In his later years, he had his dog, Chaco. But I did learn a lot from Bill. I learned a lot about good work habits. I learned about a good bit about real estate from him just by being around him. Just good memories about Bill and the people that he worked with, clients. And the clients all love Bill Bates.
Dad intended to go to Clemson, but it turned out he ended up going to the University of South Carolina. But when he finished undergrad, he didn't know where he was going to go, so he walked over to the law school, signed up, and that was all that was necessary to get into law school back then. And then after that, went into the Army. He ended up serving in the JAG Corps in Korea and served, I believe, 2 years before finally coming back and hanging out his shingle. I always understood Dad had a good reputation as a good, thorough lawyer. He did a lot of collection work. Dad was also very, very involved in the community. Dad was known as an aggressive lawyer. I think most people who have dealt with him would have said so. He was not impolite, but he definitely worked very hard to represent his clients' interests. Dad was very involved in the commercial practice of law, not only here in South Carolina, but also in the country. Dad was competitive. That's one of the things I will always remember about Dad, whether it would be sports, whether it would be in the practice of law, whether it would be just being a part of an organization. Dad was in just about every organization he ever joined. He wanted to be president, and he ended up being president. Recently, Dad got very involved back in his military practice. He went on the honor flight, which went when they did the World War II memorial and they started doing the honor flights. He went with the honor flights with the Korean War veterans. Dad was very, very healthy, and we thought actually he was going to outlive us. It was a real shocker that he didn't, but he did live to be 94. So he had a full life.
Dennis was a great mentor for estate planning and elder law because he had already been doing it for a number of years. And he was one of the first attorneys in the Low Country, really, to start an elder law practice. His clients all loved him. Even when he retired, they still all asked me about him and how he was doing, and just always said such nice things about him. And he just really wanted to help his clients. I think what I learned the most from Dennis was how to be patient with the type of clients that we were assisting, and just empathy, because people are calling you and they're really in circumstances that are overwhelming for them. And he just really knew how to put those clients at ease and make them feel like, oh, there is a solution to this. Dennis was definitely a family man. He really thought a lot of his wife. He was really proud of her. And he really, outside of practicing law, dedicated a lot of time to his family. What I'm going to miss most about Dennis is that he just always had a solution to so many problems. He was so smart and quick on his feet and coming up with an answer.
When I met him, I was a new public defender, and he had been at the solicitor's office maybe a year or two. I would describe Johnny as a very thorough attorney. He had been doing this for over 20 years, specifically criminal law. When he was with the solicitor's office, he basically was what I would call the drug czar. He focused on the drug cases, so he was extremely knowledgeable about those cases. In the solicitor's office, he was one of the people that started implementing the drug court in Berkeley County. So he treated all people with humility and respect. That was just the type of person that he was. We always went to him for his expertise with the drug cases. And so he taught me a lot about specifically drug cases, probable cause searches. I just think he was a wealth of knowledge as it relates to that. There are tons of people that he mentored. He always was open to any questions that anyone had, anything you wanted to run by him as it relates to your case. I will remember that he had a great sense of humor. He's a hand-to-hand guy through and through, and loved his city and just loved his family. And most of all, I'll remember that he was a genuinely kind-hearted person. And he was a gentleman, and he was a gentleman.
Jim was my neighbor on Broad Street, and so I would see him almost every day. Jim did mostly criminal work, and that was everything from the bond court to appellate law cases and some very specialized niches. And he was always enthusiastic about his work, regardless of whether it's here in the local magistrate's court or whether he was appearing in our state appellate courts. I would describe Jim as a relatively quiet lawyer for someone who practiced in criminal court, but he was always full of wit and trying to apply it. And particularly with the kinds of grave issues he was dealing with in the criminal court, he always sought to lend dignity and put the best foot forward for his client in any way he could. Jim has a wonderful wife, Morgan Falk. He has 3 wonderful grown sons, one grandchild and another grandchild on the way. I learned from Jim, or I guess I relearned the importance of, regardless of how big or small your client's case or how bad a situation your client may be in, there are no shortcuts with preparation for court, and particularly for criminal defense lawyers, in putting up the absolute best defense you can. I'm going to miss the most about Jim, seeing him on the sidewalk and seeing his smile as he hurriedly dashed off to a hearing that he was about to be late for.
I first started clerking for Judge Fields in 1989, and a lifelong friendship, mentorship. As a judge, the number one thing that was important to him was the public's perception of our system, and that people were treated fairly and courteously. At the heart of it, he believed our system was only strong as people's confidence in it. I'm reminded of a story. He tried a death penalty case that was remanded. It was reversed and remanded to be tried again. And it ended up with the same result. The young man was sentenced to death. The mother of that young man left a letter on his windshield that said, even though my son has been sentenced to death, I know this time he was treated fairly. And I have no qualms, and I thank you, for presiding over this case. And I just think that's the greatest compliment that a person, that a judge could get. The most I learned from him, and I'm going to quote his mother, and she said, son, I really can't give you much guidance about the law. I don't know much about lawyering. She said, but I know about people. She said, and in life you got to get along with people, even if you got to do most of the getting. And that summarizes much of his perspective about life. What I loved about his community service, and just about him as a human being, is the quiet way he went about doing things, and often did things anonymously. If he ever saw anyone in need, from the least of these to the greatest of these, he always stepped in. Yeah, one thing that I'll remember the most about him was his laughter. He had a great zest for life. He loved life. He loved everything about being a judge. He loved everything about being a lawyer. He loved everything about his journey. And I was with him until the end, was able to say goodbye. But he told me, he said, dear, life don't owe me nothing, and I don't owe life anything. He felt he had maximized everything life had to offer. People need to know he was just a great human being.
I first met Kirk in 1972. I was an adjunct professor at the University of South Carolina School of Law, and he was a brand new professor there. When the Charleston School of Law formed in 2005, he was asked to come there as a distinguished visiting professor, and I went there as a professor. He was there from 2005 to 2015, when he retired from teaching. He did not retire from practice. He was still practicing law. Most of what he did was he was an arbitrator with the American Arbitration Association. He was also an arbitrator for the New York Stock Exchange. He was highly respected. He had a great judicial temperament. Everybody he met loved him. I guess the best thing about Kirk, on a personal note, was he was the original Renaissance man. He was interested in everything. He loved people. Most of all, he loved his daughter, Alexandra, who misses him intensely at this point in time. He loved teaching. He loved his students. He was not an easy professor, from what my students told me. He was exacting and demanding. Everybody who took his course felt like they had learned a great deal. He loved teaching probably more than practicing, but he liked practicing and he loved winning. I think what I learned the most from him is how to be a great human being. I don't know anybody who didn't like him when they met him. That's a great attribute.
I first met Mitchell when I moved from our firm's Greenville office down here to Charleston in 2010. And Mitchell immediately invited me to lunch. And that was classic Mitchell. He loved including people, and he was always, looking to make new friends. Mitchell was an absolute character. He had an incredibly quick wit, and he was always making people laugh. As a lawyer, Mitchell had a very long and successful career, and he was nationally known in the public finance community for his work on major financings for things like student housing projects, universities, retirement communities, and healthcare facilities. He provided excellent client service, and the people for whom he worked really loved him. He poured everything he had into his relationships. So, for example, I have never seen someone so in love with their spouse after 28 years of marriage. He also doted on his two nieces, Margie and Helen, and was a very loving big brother to his sister, Margaret. And I am, constantly reminded of Mitchell's advice on being a lawyer. For example, he would say, don't let white clouds turn gray, and don't let gray clouds turn black. In short, be proactive rather than reactive. Well, I think above all, I'm gonna remember his generosity. Generosity with his time, his advice, his friendship, and not just in the office, but in every aspect of life.
Lip kept telling me in the early 2000s that when he retired, he was going to come practice law with me. And sure enough, in August of 2006, he showed up and we practiced law for a while after that. Lip Lipscomb was a gentleman and a scholar, and that term is overused a lot, but I think anybody that knew Lip would know that he was very much a gentleman. What a lot of people don't know is the degree to which he was a scholar. So he produced a multi-volume set called Lipscomb's Walker on Patents that has been cited by the U.S. Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. He also produced a multi-volume set that was published by West Publishing Company on patent claims. So he was very much a scholar and very well recognized as a patent attorney, again, by the patent bar as well as the courts, including the U.S. Supreme Court. What I remember most about Lip would be when we were teaching, because we collaborated to put a curriculum together for our patent law class at the University of South Carolina, and we didn't teach from a book. We taught based on cases that we found that we thought were pertinent, and the curriculum was one that was designed by us. We had a long-term relationship, and even when I moved firms, Lip moved with me. So he has been a loyal friend and mentor for many years.
I would describe my dad as an attorney as someone that loved the profession. He enjoyed going to work every day. He cherished solving complex questions. He literally enjoyed the practice from as long as I've ever seen him in a work mode, all the way up until 2 days before he passed away in his 90s. So he certainly, as we all get older and we watch how things change, he had more of an opportunity to see how things change because he was one of the founding tax lawyers. But he enjoyed the practice. He worked with the different tax panels. He worked on accreditation and certifying tax lawyers. And he just found it to be a very wonderful way to make a living. My father was one of 5 children, one of the large family. I have 5 siblings. My mother is still alive and well. It seemed like we were always in a family event. That was our weekend. And with a crowd that big, that many children, that's what you did on the weekends. You went and saw family. At one point, it was frustrating to travel with so many kids. So he bought a Checker Aerobus, which was the old Checker cab elongated. It had 8 doors, 4 doors on each side, 4 rows. And he said, you can't complain over who sits next to who. You each have your assigned seat. We still find a way to complain. And with us, we have a family firm. So there's still times when you feel like you're just going to walk downstairs and run a question by him.
I first met Judge Stokes in 1977. We were involved in a political campaign together. When I met him, he wasn't an attorney. He was selling subscriptions to the Post and Courier newspapers, I remember, door to door. Then he got married, and that is what led to him becoming a lawyer. He practiced varied law. He handled criminal work, he handled civil work, he was a very likable type guy. He had a sense of humor. As far as how he treated his clients, as all I can tell you about that is at various times people would ask me to refer them to an attorney, and I would always refer them to him, and I never had anyone complain about his services. Well, Mark had a varied experience as a judge. He was not only the municipal judge of Hanahan, he had previously served as the Berkeley County Master in Equity for a few years, and he was a Berkeley County Magistrate also. Mark was a easygoing guy, and he had a very good sense of humor. He was very funny, actually. He could do a good imitation of Steve Martin. He was humorous when he had to be, stern when he needed to be, but I actually never saw him get mad. If he did, he didn't appear to show it. When people came before him, he treated them with respect. He, like I say, was rather easygoing. He wasn't loud, so he talked rather softly. And I'll miss his humor. A lot of times I'd pick up the phone and he would be imitating somebody's voice. I knew it was him, but that was the type of guy I was. And I miss his humor, and I miss his abilities as an attorney and as a judge.
Sean was born and raised in Massachusetts. I first met him in 1994 when he was a summer law clerk with Wise & Cole, later known as Pratt Thomas Walker. Both Sean and I had gone to the Citadel. Sean was a 1992 graduate and had a very distinguished career as a member of the Corps of Cadets. Sean became an associate with our firm after graduating from the University of South Carolina. He later became a shareholder in the firm. Early on in his law career, Sean displayed great talent. Sean and I tried some death cases together in civil matters we were defending. Sean had an incredible sense of humor. He could mimic almost anyone. Looking back on my time practicing law with Sean, I appreciate how well-rounded he was as an attorney. He was comfortable doing all aspects of the practice of law. I will always remember Sean as a good friend with a great sense of humor. I will also remember him as a brilliant attorney whom I trusted and admired. One of Sean's best friends and classmates from the Citadel summed up Sean's life this way. Sean loved others the best he could. He loved his parents, his sister, and his niece and nephews. He loved the Citadel, the University of South Carolina, and the New England Patriots. He was a man I trusted and admired. Sean valued friendships and a good laugh, mostly at his own expense. I miss him, but I know he is now in good hands.
Jeff and I first met when we both started working for Reese Joy at about the same time. As a lawyer, Jeff had an intellect that was second to none. He had a very deep interest in medicine, and he used that in the personal injury cases that he handled. I learned a lot from Jeff over the years. As we were coming along as young lawyers, it was always helpful to me to look up to Jeff as a superior intellect, a guy who could unravel the most complicated set of facts, simplify the complex, develop themes that appeal to any jury. He always had time to teach us in the office and other people as well, but he never pontificated. His talent was enormous and unparalleled. Aside from the law practice, Jeff had many interests. His music collection, photography, he had his own darkroom, but most important was his family. He has 3 daughters who he loved with all his heart and who hold him in high esteem. But one of his most charming attributes was his stunning sense of humor. His wit was lightning fast. He could have been a star on Saturday Night Live. He was Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, all rolled into one. He kept our office in stitches of laughter several times every week. His humor is one of those things that all who knew him will miss the most.